everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, it looks like we've had another big bang this year. This time in this video, we're going to be talking about what the sun did a few days ago because there was a big bang. And that kind of falls in line with other big bangs this year. Like we started off this year with the undersea volcano near Tonga, which produced the largest explosion ever recorded by modern instruments, even larger than the largest nuclear bomb. We also had the meteor that went over the Salt Lake metro area, which everybody in that area heard it, all the way from southern Idaho, all the way down to Provo, which is a really large area. People were able to hear it. And now this. So we're going to talk about what's going on with the sun. We're going to talk a little bit about the Earth's magnetic field. And then another thing that's really interesting. This year, according to New York Times, this is 2022 is the year of weddings. It's the year of weddings, the most since 1984. So just buckle up. This is going to be an interesting one. So I'm going to start with this email from Sam Lee. He says, "Hi, Jared. There's a fellow on YouTube by the name of Suspicious Observers who monitors the sun on a daily basis. He's claiming the sun is going to change either around 2030 or 2040. A lot of what this scientist's work is based on is the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field. I personally like to consider the Earth's magnetic field to be the quote-unquote bursting of the veil in LDS culture. The changing of our sun could also mean the beginning of the millennium. Check out his channel when you get a chance. A lot of what he says goes over my head, but I'm slowly picking up." Well, don't worry, you're not the only one. I have been watching him for quite some time. I'll put the link for his channel below. Okay, Suspicious Observers. And yeah, he covers these things. There's a lot of good channels out there that watch the sun, they watch the earth. They're just watching for all these different things that our monitors can pick up. One that I really like is Mr. MBB333. He's out of Arizona, which is where the last place I lived before Kansas. And he does a really good job watching for all these different types of things, sky phenomena, but as well as watching the sun, watching the Schumann resonance, checking the the Yellowstone supervolcano. He watches for a lot of different things. And this is actually where I found out. It's this channel where I found out about this huge thing that just happened with the sun. So let's get into that. Okay, we're in Newsweek, Tech and Science. The sun just produced an explosion so big, it will be studied for years. Okay, this article is from today. I'm recording this on the 7th, but I'm going to post it tomorrow. Okay, it says, on September 5th, NASA's Stereo A spacecraft recorded a significant coronal mass ejection, or CME. And these happen all the time. Okay, CMEs are very, very common. An eruption of plasma and magnetic activity from the sun's atmosphere that occurred on the far side of the sun. So in this case, we were lucky. It happened on the side of the sun that's facing away from the Earth. But anyway, it continues. Since the CME did not occur in the direction of Earth, scientists spotted it by its halo, a giant shock wave that could be seen from Earth's position on the other side of the sun. And I'm sorry, but I don't have a graphic for that. I guess it kind of shows it here. You can see this, what looks like it looks kind of like an explosion going out. The sun is right here. This white circle is like the size of the sun. And then this black spot kind of covers up some of that other area outside the sun. But this big thing right here, this is the explosion. It's the shock wave. It's the CME, and it was huge. Okay, so let's read a little bit more. CMEs occur all the time, some facing toward the Earth and some facing away from it, but George Ho, a space physicist at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, APL, who works with the European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter satellite, told Solar Activity News website spaceweather.com that the September 5th explosion was so big that, quote, science papers will be studying this for years to come. So this was out of the ordinary. This was out of the ordinary. Okay. And then he says, I can safely say that the September 5th event is one of the largest, if not the largest, solar energetic particle, or SEP, storms that we have seen so far since Solar Orbiter launched in 2020. Okay. Solar activity is increasing as part of the sun's roughly 11-year natural cycle, and activity is expected to peak in the summer of 2025. And that also happens to be the year, it could be 2026, but it could be 2025. That happens to be the year that the Salt Lake Temple is supposed to be finished with renovations. 2024, 2025, 2026, those are 3 years that we all really have our eyes on, because we have the upcoming Great American Eclipse of 2024 that's going to happen. I'm not going to go into that. I've talked about that ad nauseum. But the Salt Lake Temple is going to be completed around this time. All right. And So anyway, however, scientists have noticed that the activity in the current stage of the sun's cycle is much higher than predicted. So we're going through a very active time now with the sun. Even though it's on this 11-year cycle, things are much higher at this point in the cycle than predicted. Okay, quote, when the sun changes, it also changes the environment around it. The activity at this time is way higher than we expected. That's from Noor Rawafi, Parker Solar Probe project scientist at the APM, whatever, that person. So things are happening with the sun. Things are happening with the sun, and we've had a huge CME, just to go along with this really loud year that we're having. We're having a loud year. So I looked at the date for this. So it says here in the article, it happened on September 5th. And whenever things happen in September, October, I always want to look a little bit closer, because that's the time frame of the high holy days in Judaism, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Although I knew right off the bat that it wouldn't be on Rosh Hashanah, because that's later in the month. I think it's on the 25th. We're about to see right now. So I pulled up my Hebrew calendar. Okay, yeah, look, Rosh Hashanah is going to start the evening or at sundown on the 25th of this month, September. And then the full first day is on the 26th on our calendar. So I looked at the calendar. Okay, here's the 5th right here. There's nothing on the calendar. It's the 9th of Elul. We've talked about the significance of Elul recently. This is the month that leads up to the new year. Rosh Hashanah is the new year, and that's when the date changes. It was interesting right off the bat to notice that this event happened exactly 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. So 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, we had this, which reminded me of August 13th, when we had the meteor explode over Utah. It was on the 13th, and this was the first day of like a 7, I don't know how to explain it, but they like go over 7 different, I guess, important scriptures. It's like a 7-part countdown to Rosh Hashanah. So the meteor happened on the first day of that countdown. And it also happened exactly 2 weeks before the beginning of the month of Elul, which was 2 weeks later on the 27th. So you have these heavenly events that are happening, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before these significant Jewish days. And then I just want to point out again that it also followed. It was at the end of the week of Tisha B'Av. So you had Tisha B'Av on the 7th, okay, on Sunday. And I'm looking at this from a Jewish point of view. So their end of the week is Saturday or Shabbat, right? And that's the day that the meteor happened. It was on the Shabbat of the week of Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in Jewish history, where they traditionally they believe this is the day that both temples were destroyed, and there was the expulsion from the United Kingdom at one point, or England, maybe specifically England, of Jews, and then also the Spanish Inquisition. And then the day before is Tu B'Av. And, this happens every year, of course. You have Tisha B'Av, then later you have Tu B'Av on the 15th of Av. And this is the wedding day. This is like the big romance wedding day for Jews. Many Jews get married on this day. So, destruction of temples, okay, the wedding day, and then the next day over church headquarters, there's this meteor that explodes and everybody hears it. And it's on the day that you start the count up or the count down, however you want to think of it, to Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year. Okay, so the 5th of September or the 9th of Elul, this is how it lines up this year. Is there anything significant about this date? Well, I decided to look it up because on Chabad.org, I noticed that they, like for any given date, they'll tell you the significant things that have happened in Jewish history on that date. So this is what I found. Here it is. So we're on Chabad.org, okay? And it turns out that the 9th of Elul is the birthday of Dan, as in Dan, one of the 12 sons of Israel. It says here, Dan, the son of Jacob, and Bilhah, 5th of the 12 tribes, which is interesting because this event happened on the 5th on our calendar, on the Gregorian calendar. So he's the 5th of the 12 tribes. He was born on the 9th of Elul in Haran. He lived to the age of 125. Okay, so does it mean anything? I don't know. I don't know that it does. This could be a stretch, but I think it's okay to just kind of explore the possibility. And as we look a little bit more into Dan and the significance of Dan, I think that you might find this a little bit interesting. So let's read a little bit more about Dan. We do have one person. Let me pull up the survey, the poll. Which tribe of Israel are you from? I'm pretty sure we have one person from Dan that responded to this. We have two. We have two people from Dan. Okay. All right. So hopefully you're listening. Okay. This is also on Chabad.org. 12 tribes of Israel, Dan, the judge. So that's kind of interesting. It's interesting because, oh my gosh. Look at this. This article was put out on August 13th. Of 2017, August 13th of 2022. That's when the meteor happened. Holy cow. That is kind of interesting. Okay. So Dan, the judge. Now pretend that the Lord, he's doing things in order. He has an order to everything. The tribes mean something. The days of the year, they all mean something. Numbers mean something. Words, everything has meaning. Okay. Now, again, this could be a misinterpretation, but let's look at it through that lens. Dan, the judge. And we know that there's a really big judgment coming up pretty soon. If you're counted as one of the wicked, it's going to be a sort of judgment day for you because that's the day that you're gonna die, and you're not gonna be going into the millennium. So maybe it's fitting if this is some kind of second coming sign, this huge CME from the sun that's going to be studied for years to come. Maybe it's fitting that happened on Dan's birthday. Dan the judge. Okay, it says, God judge between me and also listen to my voice. Genesis 36. Rachel named the first child of her nursemaid, Bilhah, Dan, a name that embodies the quality of justice. Judgment and justice are about setting boundaries and maintaining objectivity to avoid confusion. Civilization rests on the justice of its laws and its ability to draw clear lines between right and wrong. This painting of Gush Dan in the Tel Aviv area, shows the natural boundary between sea and land, with space for a city to spring up and come into focus. We see the land and water, city and sky, the memory of the past and the glimmerings of a future. The tribe of Dan, the last tribe to travel in the nation's desert encampment formation, had the task of collecting any items left behind. They are the ones who navigate the boundaries and, while maintaining distinctions, weave together an objective and just point of view. So what is this talking about? Okay, so when Israel was in the wilderness, we had a particular way. There was an order of march and also an order of encampment. So when the Israelites were camped for a while, the tabernacle was set up. It was in the middle, right? This was the portable temple. The Levites surrounded the tabernacle because they had been given the priesthood, and so they worked in the tabernacle. They were the priests, or the Kohanim, and the Levites, the Leviim. And so the way that it was all ordered is that you had four groups of three. So each group had one tribe that was the leader of the other two. So in the case of Judah, Zebulun, and Issachar, Judah was the leader. This was the tribe that led the other two that were on the east side of the tabernacle. Reuben was the leader of Simeon and Gad. Ephraim was the leader of Benjamin and Manasseh. And Dan was the leader of Asher and Naphtali. Okay, so in other words, Dan was the lead of the last in the order of march. Okay, and I don't know if he was like actually the last. That what we just read made it seem like he was probably this tribe was probably the last. So, I also want to point out another thing. You'll remember that I've been talking to Rabbi Gedalia Gerfin. He's an Israeli Orthodox Jew. I got set up with him through Israel 365. I talk to him every other week. And he shared this graphic with me that he made where to Jews, and I think you could safely say for our church too, that the 12 tribes, that number is not, it's not arbitrary. And everyone kind of realizes, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 months of the year. And there's more to that, at least in the Jewish perspective. I've already gone over that. It has to do with the letters that make up the name of God, which interestingly not only works for their name of God, but ours when we talk about Adamon Diamond. But anyway, I've already talked about that. So when you look at this here, if you think of each tribe as a month of the year, the way that they order it is that Judah leads spring. Okay, so Judah would be like Nisan, the first month of spring, and then Zebulun would be Iyar, Issachar would be Sivan or Sivan, I don't know. And then after that, you'd have the next leader. Reuben would be the leader, the one to lead or bring in summer. Ephraim would bring in fall. Dan would bring in winter. Okay, so we're going to come back to this. So just remember this. I think it's fascinating, and I think that the Jews are probably right about that. Okay, now we are on inner.org Hebrew calendar, and this talks a little bit about Dan, the parts that I have highlighted. Now think about Dan. If this event that happened on the 5th of September is some kind of sign, like a sign in the heavens, that has to do with the second coming, again, look at it through this point of view. Okay, the Dan personality. The new month of Tevet represents the coldest month of the year, the month that is most associated with the winter. So Dan is associated with winter. You see this right here? You have fall, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, fall, and then Dan leads with winter. And this is his month right here, Tevez. All right, going back. Every month of the year is associated, according to the Arizal and based on the Sefer Yetzirah, it's like a Kabbalistic text, with one of the 12 tribes. With the 13th month, the second Adar, that appears in intercalculated years being associated with the tribe of Levi. That's just referring to if you have a lunar calendar, you know how we have leap years, and on a leap year we add an extra day to February. Well, on a lunar calendar, what you have to do is every so often you have to add another month every so many years. And so when that happens, you have Adar 1 and Adar 2. So Adar 2 is a leap month. Like it's a leap month or a month that's part of the leap year to get everything arranged. So whenever that happens, that during that leap year, Levi represents Adar 2. Okay, so the tribe of Dan is one associated with the month of Tevet. Let us see how Dan warms and illuminates the cold of winter. Okay, I'm going to skip on down. The tribe of Dan has a special power to triumph. Think about the second coming. They finish the job with one fell swoop. Samson, which he was from Dan, and he was also a Nazarite, by the way. Samson bears a spark for the future, or of the future, a messianic spark passed on from Cushim, the son of Dan. In fact, the name Cushim is an anagram for Mashiach. Jacob also describes Dan as a snake on the path, quote unquote. In Gematria, snake, and here's the word right here, also equals Mashiach. Gematria is the practice where in Judaism they view letters of the Hebrew alphabet as containers for both a number and a letter. Okay, and it's like interchangeable. Like letters have an inherent numerical value. So, and this study of words in their numerical values is called gematria. Okay, before his death, Jacob attempts to see and reveal the time of the redemption to his sons. When we're talking about the redemption in Judaism, that's when Mashiach comes and you have the Messianic age. They also call it the final redemption, and it would be equivalent to what we're looking forward to as the millennium. Okay, so before his death, Jacob attempts to see and reveal the millennium. And he says, quote, gather and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. End quote. The end, however, was concealed from him. God's essential name, Havaya, I don't know, is also not written in the Torah portions read during the month of Tevet about the descent of the small family of Israel to Egypt. But Jacob blesses Dan. The light suddenly shines, a bright messianic light to illuminate the darkness of Egypt. Quote, I hope, God, for your salvation. This is the one and only time that Havaya is mentioned in Tevet's Torah portions. There is a special Aramaic expression in the Midrash, which means triumph is ours. Okay, so I know that's like a lot of stuff, like if you don't know Judaism. All I want to highlight is that he's kind of equated to the Messiah. He's also equated with triumph, okay? Down here, like we just read, triumph is ours. And we know that that's like a big thing that goes along with the second coming, that Christ will have, trodden the winepress alone, and the work is done, and he puts all of his enemies under his feet, right? Triumph is ours. Okay, this clearly alludes to Dan. The first word contains the name Dan, while the remaining 5 letters in the phrase, which are this right here, equal 162, or 3, times 54, the value of Dan, thus the numerical value of the entire phrase is equal to 4 times Dan. Okay, so just gematria stuff. Okay, proper anger. The comparison of Dan to the snake expresses his attribute of anger. Anger is dangerous, and we must generally distance ourselves from it as if it were fire. It has the power of chaos and is not something to be played with. Dan's anger, however, is positive and fitting. He knows how to fight with Israel's sworn enemies who do not understand any other language. Now, does that not also sound like the second coming? The Lord's anger will be kindled against the wicked, and again, judgment. Dan, victory. Dan, righteous anger. Dan. You see why this is kind of like you know, why I'm kind of interested in this. Okay, and then to finish this off, Dan's real place in life is in the role of Judah's right-hand man. So the tribe of Dan is the tribe of Judah's right-hand man. They realize that the Messiah descends through Judah. Everybody knows that, right? And so Dan, the right-hand man of Judah. Despite the differences between the two, they have an interesting mode of cooperation. In the work of constructing the tabernacle, the chief artisans were Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and Oholiab from the tribe of Dan. In Jacob's blessing, we see the same concept. Quote, Dan will judge his nation like the one among the tribes of Israel, referring to Judah. So, in other words, Dan will judge, I guess, his own tribe the way that Judah will judge all of Israel through the Messiah. Anyway, referring to Judah, who is described as the one, the most special of the tribes. In his blessing to the tribes, Moses uses the same words for both Judah and Dan. Dan, quote, Dan is a lion cub, and, quote, a lion cub is Judah. Finally, Kabbalah teaches that the chief of staff of Mashiach, who is from the tribe of Judah, will be from the tribe of Dan. Together, they are victorious. Okay, so this is Jewish understanding, and I'm not saying that this is our church's understanding. Our church doesn't really elaborate very much when it comes to these other tribes. It really doesn't. When you study church materials, it's mostly all about Ephraim, Manasseh, and Judah, primarily. So I'm not going to say that this is doctrine, but it's something to maybe think about, because I wouldn't think necessarily that they're wrong about the attributes of the tribe of Dan. Okay, now here's another thing I wanted to read. This is from the Chabad of Central New Jersey, so they would be associated with the larger Chabad organization. And it says here, the first tribe that Moses is shown is Dan, whose inner sense is anger or righteous indignation. So righteous anger. This is the holy anger that eradicates evil. In the Torah portion of Vayet Kanan, listen to Rabbi Ginsburgh's audio lecture on the Torah portion of that. We meditate on the Mashiach as the smoke of the fire that burns away evil in the world. That sounds a lot like the second coming. Okay, Mashiach as the smoke of the fire that burns away evil in the world. The Mashiach's first goal is to eradicate evil. Our sages add that the tribe of Dan, with its sense of holy anger, will produce the commander-in-chief of the army of the Mashiach. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. So the other thing about this is when we go back to this chart, okay, and I do think that this is correct. I think it's correct because with Judah being in Nisan, or matching up with Nisan, that works really well because Christ came through Judah. He is the Messiah, and Nisan is when they celebrate Passover, right? And Passover is all about Christ and the atonement. You have the Passover meal or the Seder, right? You have one day later, you have first fruits or Bikurim, which was fulfilled by the resurrection. You have the whole week, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It alludes to Christ being risen, right? And then after that, you have the 50-day countdown starting from first fruits that leads up to Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks. And that's when the Holy Ghost came to his followers. During Pentecost. Pentecost is just another name for the Feast of Weeks. So anyway, it's fitting that those things would have happened in the spring. And then, like I've talked about before on the channel, the fall feasts, so you have the spring observances or the spring feasts, and then you have the fall feast. There's 4 in the springtime, 3 in the fall. The first of which is Rosh Hashanah. which leads up to 10 days later, you have Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year, the Day of Atonement. And then it's like, I think it's like the week after that, you have the Feast of Tabernacles. Joseph Smith received the gold plates on Rosh Hashanah. I think that if Rosh Hashanah was to be fulfilled prophetically, that happened when Joseph Smith received the gold plates. The reason why is because this is the time. This is the time really of bringing in the harvest. You have first fruits all the way back in springtime. Okay, but I'm gonna have to refresh myself on this sometime. I think that typically, though, the main portions of the harvest would come in between. I think it's between Shavuot and the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is the last one. The Feast of Tabernacles represents the end of the harvest. So it's fitting that it's in fall. Now, let me point this out to you, okay? And I've kind of already talked about this before. Imagine that the history of the earth, the 7,000 years, is like a day, okay? And a day is made up of 2 sets of 12. You have 12 hours and 12 hours to make 24 hours, right? So let me see if I can explain this. Okay. So first, let's look at it from a seal point of view, right? There's the 7,000 years of the Earth's temporal history. We learn about this in D&C section 77, where it explains what the seals mean. And it's something that the other Christian churches don't recognize. It's unique to our church. You find it here. This is the New Testament student manual for seminary. It talks about it here. I wanted to put it on this spreadsheet so it's a little bit clearer. So the first seal was from 4,000 to 3,000 BC. Second seal from 3 to 2. Third seal from 2 to 1. And then fourth seal from 1,000 BC to year 1, basically. I put a 0, but you know what I mean. When Christ came. Now, we know that Christ came in the meridian of time. If you look at it this way, it doesn't really feel like he's like coming in the exact middle, but you could still say that it's the meridian. You could also look at it like this. I pulled up my favorite timeline of the Old Testament from the church. Okay, so you had Adam all the way back here around the year 4000. 1,000 years later, you have Enoch, who just a few years later, or a little while later, him and his city take off. So Adam is like the first, is like at the 4,000 year mark approximately. Enoch leaving is at the 3,000 year mark. 1,000 years after that is Abraham. Abraham's like right here, right at the 2,000 year mark. 1,000 years after that, you have the first king of Israel, Saul, right here. And then 1,000 years after that, Christ. Okay, just to give you a sense. So if you were to cut off the time before the year 3000 BC, so if we just kind of like said that this was the start of the earthly day, so to speak, think about it that way. Let's go back here. So let's just pretend like this right here doesn't even exist. Okay, and then you see you have 1, 2, 3,000 years. Christ comes, and then afterwards 1, 2, 3,000 years, which takes you to the end of the world, 3000 AD, when the church goes, or when the earth goes from terrestrial to celestial. So if you look at it that way, then he's like exactly in the middle, in the meridian of time. I don't know that that's necessarily a correct way of looking at it, but either way, we know that he's the meridian of time. So again, pretend that from here to here, this is like a 24-hour day. And let's look at this. So at the time of Enoch or Adam, because like maybe it's not exact, I don't know. You start with up here. This would be 12 o'clock. This would be like 12 a.m. You go around, okay, you come back, and then you're at noon. And this is in noon is when Christ comes, right? The middle of the day, noon. Makes sense. He comes, he does the atonement, he sets up his church, which doesn't last for long. And then time goes on, and then you have summer. Summer's hot and everything. But there is the spread of Christianity at the very least. And I think that sometimes we overlook the importance of what was going on during the Great Apostasy, because although it was a great apostasy, it prepared the world to know who Christ was. Okay, even though they weren't maybe necessarily doing it correctly, they didn't have priesthood authority, so on and so forth. Christianity really did grow a lot during this period and paved the way for us to do what we're doing right now, I think. So anyway, now we get down here. Now summer's over. So let's say that the end of spring and summer was like the great apostasy. And then we have this. We have Ephraim, and we move into the fall time when Joseph Smith receives the gold plates, the time of Joseph Smith. And then we have just a short time before we go into winter. And winter starts with Dan. Winter starts with Dan. I think that you could call this last part right here the millennium. Winter, because this is when things die. Okay. During a year, things grow, they're born in the spring, they go for the whole year, and then they die in the winter, and it's done. Okay? The harvest. It's the harvest. So it's just interesting that it seems like we're kind of in a fall time right now. Like the last dispensation lines up with the fall and the fall harvest. The last harvest of this entire process before winter comes. And it just so happens that Dan is the tribe of winter that brings in winter, and that he represents all these things. It's like perfect. Dan the judge, right? Dan the judge. Dan the man of righteous anger. Dan, what was the other things? Judge. Oh yeah, finish the job. Right here, finish the job. Get it done. Triumph is ours. I think that it's very fitting that this is where he would fall at the end of the harvest, So I may not have it completely right, but I kind of think that it is a little bit right. I don't think that because obviously this dispensation has only been 200 years, and I did the calculations. It doesn't fit as far as if we're trying to make this mathematically correct. But relatively speaking, if you're looking just at events, okay, not necessarily measuring periods of time, but you're just looking at events, it kind of makes sense. You have Christ in the meridian of time at noon, and then later on in the day, when the day is about to be done, that's when you have the end. So, excuse me. So, I find that really fascinating. So just to review one more time. So the sun had a really large explosion facing away from the Earth on the 5th of September, which was the 9th of Elul, which is Dan's birthday in the Bible. So I don't know if that's intentional, but it seems kind of perfect, especially given the fact that 3 weeks later starts the new year, and the Shemitah, or the sabbatical year, which we're currently in, will be over, right? Every 7 years is a Sabbath year. It's a sabbatical year, and that's what we're in right now. That's going to end later this month, and 3 weeks before it ends, there's this huge explosion on the sun. And then the last month of this sabbatical year, 2 weeks before that starts, there's a big explosion. There's a big explosion over Utah, right? On the day when you start the countdown to the new year, and the day after the day of weddings, to be of. So, Yeah, there's probably gonna be some people that are like, you're just looking into it too much. This is, and that's fine. You can believe whatever you want. And then earlier this year, in January, I don't remember the exact day. You know, let's find out. Let's find out right now. When was the Tonga volcano eruption? It was on the 15th of January. I'm sure I already looked at this, but well, it happened on a Shabbat. You know, if you're looking at it from the Jewish point of view, it happened on a Sabbath. What's Shabbat Shira? Um, Shabbat Shira is the name given to the Shabbat that includes Parsha Beshalach. The Torah reading of the week contains the songs of the sea. The songs of the sea? And that's where it happened. It was an underwater volcano. This was the song by the children of Israel after the passage of the Red Sea. Oh my gosh. So that may have been more significant than I thought. I don't remember if I feel like I would have remembered this if I had put this in a video. So on the day that they're doing the Song of the Sea, that commemorates Israel passing through the Red Sea, that's when this underwater volcano, the largest explosion of all time, happens. And then a couple months later, we have a general conference, the likes of which I've never seen, where there was a huge call out for people to go on missions, right? Because Israel's being gathered. And anyway, this is incredible. Okay, now, before I get to 2022 being the year of weddings, I wanted to point out that in this video by Suspicious Observers, he talks about the weakening magnetic field, how it's like weakening very quickly, quicker than what they expected. In fact, it says it right here. This is livescience.com. Previously, researchers estimated the field was weakening about 5% per century, but the new data revealed the field is actually weakening at 5% per decade. So instead of 100 years, 10 years, or 10 times faster than thought. Now, I think it was in this article it talks about that if the magnetic pole shifts, if it flips, it's not just going to happen like all of a sudden. It takes time for that to happen. I don't know what kind of impact that has on the planet, but he pointed out another article where it talked about the effects, putting the poles aside, so just forget the poles. This talks about the effects that a low or a weak magnetic field has on mammal life. Okay, this is for Reviews of Geophysics, the role of geomagnetic field intensity in late Quaternary evolution of humans and large mammals. So basically, the theory goes here that in the past, when the magnetic field was low, that it actually had an effect on evolution, and it caused large kill-offs of different species. In fact, it says the demise of Neanderthals at about 51 Ka can now be closely tied to the intensity minimum associated with the Last-Champ magnetic excursion. So during that time when the magnetic field was weak, they believe that that's tied to the extinction of the Neanderthals and other mammals as well. So I'm not going to really go through this, but I mean, if you want to dive into it, you can. But remember, the church doesn't have an official stance right now when it comes to evolution. I don't care either way. If it turns out that evolution is true, just the way that they've studied it, then fine. Who cares? I don't care. It could be that Adam was the very first, what you could actually call human, and it could be that the story is not that literal, and it wouldn't bother me one bit. but that doesn't mean that there wasn't an Adam that was a prophet and he was the first actual human being. Or things, there might be other details that we just don't know. Maybe Adam was actually placed here, but there were other animals or things like Neanderthals. That there's any number of possibilities, and I don't lose sleep over it. But either way, it says here about 40,000 years ago, mammalian fossils in Australia and Eurasia record an important die-off of large animals that included Neanderthals in Europe. In the Americas and Europe, a large mammalian die-off appears to have occurred about 13,000 years ago. Both die-offs can be linked to minima in Earth's magnetic field strength, implying that UVR, or ultraviolet rays, I think that's what it stood for, flux variations to Earth's surface influence mammalian evolution. Okay, so is this tied to the second coming? I don't know. I would assume that these die-offs, maybe they took time. It doesn't sound like there'd just be a mass kill just like all of a sudden because of UV rays. But it could. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it in this, so I don't know if this is what will destroy the wicked when Christ comes. I kind of tend not to think that it would be. For all we know, maybe there's going to be a huge CME that's like the likes of which we've never seen that would actually burn up the earth. Now, the effects of CMEs, they don't really do much to the earth other than they can interfere with electronics and radio communications and stuff like that. There's a fear that if there's like a really big one, it could take down the electric grid. But we don't know everything, and who's to say that the earth or the sun couldn't shoot like just a huge one that actually burdens the earth. So I don't know, but it's just interesting that the sun is a lot more active right now than what they thought. Okay, enough of that. So let's finish up this video talking about 2022 being the year for brides and grooms. This is New York Times. If the predictions pan out, there will be some 2.5 million weddings in 2022, the most since 1984, and yet it's never been more difficult to plan one. Here's what couples should expect. Rest assured, romantics, all the weddings canceled over the last couple of years have found a happy home, and that home is 2022. Oh, so I wonder if that's why, is because people canceled weddings because of the last couple of years, because of 2020 and stuff like that. Let's see what it says. I haven't read this article yet. Roughly 2.5 million weddings are expected to happen this year, the most since 1984, according to the Wedding Report, a trade group that gathered its data through a survey of vendors and consumers. A majority of the planned 2022 celebrations are rescheduled events from the last 2 years. The rest are likely to be dominated by couples who became engaged during the pandemic. Quote, when people started quarantining, they started prioritizing their relationships more, said Elizabeth Overstreet, a relationship and love coach in Raleigh, North Carolina. Quote, they had a lot of time to think about, is this the person I want to be with? The way I put it is love has taken precedence in people's lives. For context, the uptick in weddings this year is substantial, but not mind-blowing. Around 2.1 million weddings happened each year between 2009 to 2019, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, with a relatively puny 1.3 million happening in 2020 and 1.93 million in 2021, according to the Wedding Report. For those forging ahead, bottlenecks aplenty could await, especially because the pandemic has spurred challenge after challenge for the multi-billion-dollar wedding industry. Less clear are the elements that will shift the most and how couples and guests can get a grip on them. Okay, I think that's all I want to read from this one. So I still see that as significant, though, because this is something that's on a lot of people's minds this year, more so than in the past. People could be having spiritual experiences, those that are awake and thinking about the second coming. And, they go to a wedding this year for their friend or a family member, and they're thinking about that along with the second. I mean, who knows? There could be a lot to this. But the matter of the fact is that this year, the Shemitah year, is when we're having a big influx of weddings. All right. So I don't know. All this may be meaningless or it may not be. You'll just have to let me know what you think below. I tend to think that it's not meaningless. I think that our Heavenly Father is highly, highly organized and does things like this because it's part of the beauty of his organization of this world and our lives and this earth. I tend not to think that things are arbitrary. But as far as like reading them and actually knowing what they actually mean, that's another thing. But all I can say is this Shemitah year is coming to an end. And according to several sources, there's several different groups that believe that the next year would be a Jubilee. And big things happen during Jubilees. So I'm going to see if I can dig into that more, find more substantial information and try and nail that down. I don't know if I'll be successful or not, but there you go. All right, so that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it and consider signing up for the members only portion of the channel where we discuss other topics, and I'll talk to you guys later.